Today we're going to be building this large cedar planter out of 2x4s and fence pickets costing about $25. As you can see, the design is pretty similar to the smaller planter I made a while back. The old ones are still holding up well, as you can see here, but I wanted something bigger to grow some beans in since I'm stuck at home all day. The finished product is actually a little bit different, but it's generally made up of the legs, bottom frame, and fence pickets for the bottom and sides. The project really only takes one 8-foot 2x4 and 5 pickets. Throughout this build, I'm using some really nice work gloves made by Custom Grips, who's the sponsor for this video. I've used a bunch of other similar types of gloves, and I can confidently say that these are as good, if not better, than every other brand I've used. They sell a range of different gloves for different tasks. I'm going to link them in the description for you to check out. I decided to run everything through the planer to clean it up, but this is definitely optional. I also ran the pickets through the table saw just to make sure that they were all exactly the same size. Next, I ripped down the 2x4s, which are actually now about 1.5 inch by maybe 3.5 inches into 1.5 by 1.5 inch strips. In all my builds, I mainly use my drawings as a guide. It's a really good idea to pull your final dimensions off of your workpieces. So I measured the height the legs were going to need to be, and then I started cutting them down on the table saw. You can definitely use a miter saw here. I just find it easier to do repeat cuts with my table saw. With a stop block, it's easy to whip out cuts really fast. I finished up the legs and then moved on to the bottom supports. I love using pocket holes for these types of quick DIY projects. I'm using the Craig K5, but they make a bunch of very affordable variants as well, down to like $15 or $20. After laying out everything, I marked where the holes were going to go, and then I cut them all. You'll notice that I installed some of the bottom supports with the pocket holes facing up. It would have been better to have them facing down so the dirt and water doesn't sit in there, but I wanted to use the spacer on the bottom to get the exact right lift off the ground for the legs. In the end, these are cedar, so they should last a long time anyway. In addition to the outdoor pocket hole screws I'm using, I also used a very liberal amount of outdoor rated wood glue. This is a good idea because these are going to be outside in the elements with freezing and thawing, so if you want to keep them in one piece, it's probably a good idea to use an excess amount of glue. Alright, with the frame done, I flipped it over, measured where the bottom supports were going to go, and then installed them with glue and some more screws. For the sides, I'm staggering the boards so only one side will overhang. I used a scrap piece of picket to measure out the overhang, and then I cut everything down using a stop block. I installed the side slats with a ton of wood glue and brad nails to hold everything in place while the glue dried. You can also just clamp these if you want while they dry, or use nails or screws. I find that the nail holes don't actually show after the wood ages and grays out, so it doesn't really bother me, but glue alone would definitely be enough. I just made my way around installing the boards until I got to the top. For the top board, you can see that the legs don't go the whole way up to the top of the side slat. It would be stronger if they did, but I didn't want to see the supports on the finished pieces at the top, and the dirt's going to cover them with them sitting this low. Next, I measured out the bottom slats and cut them down. I ended up not having to notch out the leg slots like they are in the drawings. Instead, I just installed 3 pieces between the legs. Make sure that you leave about 1/4 inch at least in between each picket so that water can drain out the bottom. I have some old landscaping fabric from an old project, so I glued some of that in on the bottom to hold the dirt in so it wouldn't fall through the cracks. You can also just put some rocks in the bottom, which will have the same effect if you don't have any fabric. After everything dried, I put about 2 bags of potting soil in, which was just about enough. As I was planting the beans, I had a little helper come and do some of the work, so he managed to plant some of the beans himself. This is a great project to do with your kids. Also, it's fun to watch the beans grow and harvest them later and cook with them. So enjoy this while you have some time at home, everybody. I was going to stop there, but then I decided that I needed to clean things up a little bit. So I went back with my hand plane and flushed up some of the joints. This is definitely not necessary, but I'm a little bit anal about this kind of stuff. I also added a bunch of extra glue to the top corners and clamped them to dry. This helped a lot because they don't have that internal corner to glue against, as I mentioned before, so this is probably a good idea. I should have just added more to start with. And after about 2 weeks, the beans started to grow. These things can get about 6 feet tall, so they need something to support their vines. I went to the local forest and chopped down some bamboo to use in the trellis. I staked the 4 pieces for the corners, then I measured and cut off half of the bamboo on each slot to allow it to bend around the corners to make a couple horizontal supports. I tied all of these joints together with some string. This is definitely not the prettiest thing I've ever made, but it will be functional and it's going to get covered with vines soon enough. Also, I have to stay at home, so I tried to limit my trips to the store. And this time, that was really it. I like how this turned out even better than the smaller versions I made last time. I think the extra size is going to limit the impact from the local squirrels digging out all the dirt. This could definitely be done with just a hand tool if you wanted, really just a saw and some glue. Also, if things get really bad, I'll at least have some nice beans to eat. Just kidding. Stay safe, everybody, and I'll see you in the next episode.